Investment conference kicked off this morning in Sandton under the banner Accelerating Economic Growth by Building Partnerships. Our business anchor Arabile Gumede caught up with the President's economic advisor Trudi Makhaya on just what makes this conference more than just a talk shop.
Well, after putting up the banner of accelerating economic growth by building partnerships, that is the banner under which the Investment Conference 2018 happens here at the Sandton Convention Center. Things have begun to kick off, and who better to speak to than the economic advisor to the President, Trudi Makhaya, as we unpack perhaps some thoughts from her regarding the Investment Conference and a whole lot more. Trudi, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It is a very important conference, it is, and certainly building up to not only the $100 billion US, but really creating a whole lot more growth for the economy is perhaps very, very important here.
Absolutely. So the idea is that we're going to have the first conference, investment conference, where we're putting up a national value proposition. You know, many countries around the world do this, and it was about time that we also put up our stand and say this is the investment case for South Africa. It's very important for economic growth and for development to attract resources that will mobilize and power that development. So we have representatives from about 36 countries who are joining us this morning. We have all the top companies, locally top 40, all the major black industrialists, all the top women-owned businesses. We have multinationals. We have Jack Ma talking to us later, so very much also into the fourth industrial revolution. So this is saying we're open for business and we're serious about attracting investment.
The MTBPS picture, though, may not have necessarily helped the scenario somewhat. So how do you make sure that you still entice them sufficiently?
I think they understand that we've been very frank. We paint a picture of how we're going to arrest our debt levels within the next 3 years. We paint a picture of how we're maintaining our expenditure ceiling and sticking to fiscal prudence despite all the challenges that we face. And obviously that's a very tough message, but I think investors have the assurance that we're not going to go down a populist route, as has been seen in some other emerging markets, and that we're committed, obviously, to doing right by our people, but doing so within our fiscal constraints.
Doing so within fiscal constraints becomes a factor that perhaps some may not continuously believe anymore, because we've continued to reach beyond the debt ceiling, and even now projections from that MTBPS, as we've noted, were not very helpful to the cause. How do we ensure that we still tell a story good enough to be believed, not just a story good enough for SA, but that it's believed by the international community?
So I think it's been credible from the feedback that we're getting. I think obviously the concern is that people want to see that we're going to meet those metrics and that we're engaged in reforms that enable us to increase growth. Because ultimately, if you increase growth, your ratios start looking much better. And I think once they understand that story and that path towards growth, and once they see that we want to do it the right way, we want to do it through investment. We don't want any, quick schemes of printing money, etc. I think then they see that, yes, there's a challenge, but there's a solution which involves participation and which involves gaining returns when the tide turns.
Finally, we've spoken a lot about international investors, but the local ones you've noted are very, very important as well. How significant a role do they play in this conference?
Very significant. So for our first conference, in fact, national delegates make up a slight majority. So, and that's been very important that we start engaging with the story at a local level. We know that, there's huge resources in terms of cash that can be deployed. And we've been asking ourselves, what are the issues and policy constraints that we can ease to unlock that cash that is sitting idle at the moment? And I think today we'll show a meeting of minds to say, here are the policy reforms that the President will outline right now, and here are the investments that are unlocked by some of those policy reforms.
Yeah. Very finally, this could be called Davos in the Highveld if you wanted to do that. Do you plan on perhaps having this as an annual thing?
Absolutely. So we learned very many lessons from this, and it was a very homegrown team that put this together, and we're very proud of that. And we want to stamp our own brand in how these conferences and these events are run. So yes, it will be a regular feature on our calendar.
Trudi Makhaya, appreciate your time, of course, as we unpack that, the conference, the Investment Conference 2018, kicking off in earnest. President Cyril Ramaphosa, of course, unpacking and kicking things off here, as Trudi has said, that hopefully it will become a more annual thing as well. Accelerating economic growth by building partnerships. That is the banner for this investment conference. Back to you in studio.